Someone wore that at my prom. Okay, let's go. Move in.
I'm sure it's going to be.
Now, Anne, this is our press conference.
Okay.
We're going to move you over.
Okay. Very good. Okay.
Donc ici, je suis journaliste Facebook conférence de presse, OK?
All right. So, are we having the press conference? So, do you want to ask me questions?
Sure. How do you compare your style of work with that of James Tableau?
Oh, I don't know that author, I'm ashamed to say.
Okay, he wrote a book called Delicate Dependency, which
Oh, I have heard of that book.
okay, which has the same style of vampire as you, the less stereotypical and more creative and free vampire. So how do you compare your work with him?
Well, I thought his was a serious book too, and I respected it. You know, my goal is always to have a great deal of fun, but be absolutely serious about it, and you know, bring to the work the sensuality and the eroticism that seems to be absent in so much of modern fiction, and yet to talk about important things. I would say his book did that too.
What about the trend you started with your book, the vampire role-playing games, the people dressing up like Lestat, wanting to be Lestat? What do you think about that? What do you feel about that?
I think people were ready for that. People were, they had found modern fiction rather arid, and they were ready for a return to the imagination. And they wanted it very much. And we saw a number of movies that indicated that, some of them playful, some of them serious. But people definitely wanted a higher quotient of romance and sensuality. They wanted again for language to be florid. They wanted again for romance to come into their lives, and they obviously responded to this very strongly, or I wouldn't be here, you know. So.
You don't think it's getting a little carried away?
Oh, not at all. I think if anything, the sensualization of everyday life is really just coming into its own. We'll go a long way toward bringing elegance and romance to more and more people, really, you know.
Do you speak French? Because
No,
there's a
and-
lot of French in your books.
No, unfortunately, I don't speak French. I understand the French I write, but I don't really speak it.
But did you live in France at some point?
No, well, New Orleans, Louisiana is where I grew up, and I did hear French spoken every day by members of my family and sisters at school, but I didn't learn it, unfortunately. I tried, but I didn't succeed.
A lot of your vampires have French names, though, like Lestat and Louis and David Talbot. Do you
Yes.
find it sexier?
Well, I grew up with that entire French Creole heritage, and the whole story of New Orleans was wrapped up in that French romance. And so I immersed myself in stories about early New Orleans and early Louisiana. So I think it was more a world into which I slipped rather naturally. You know, it was the plantation houses were all around me, the French Quarter, all of that was part of my upbringing and my religion. I think our religion in New Orleans is more Latin, more Caribbean, and because of the French and the Spanish influence from the Caribbean.
How much of part of you is Lestat?
Oh, Lestat is my bad side, or he's the decisive one that I can't be. Where I brood in misery, he acts. You know, and I certainly think he has a conscience, without question.
But you certainly developed an idea about good and bad, you know, by writing a lot about it.
Well, I'm passionately concerned with it. It's really the only thing that obsesses me. And though I want always to write something that's a great pleasure to read, I hope, it truly obsesses me, you know, what God and the devil have to say to each other.
Did you
Or what
find
they.
answers?
Well, I looked in Memnoch. I put every question into Memnoch the Devil that I had personally. My questions are either spoken by Memnoch or they're spoken by Lestat, and in a sense, I studied a great deal of scripture and biblical works, and went deep down into my tradition, and in a sense created a God basically that was a God derived from the Bible. And said, you know, what if this were so? Well, what would be the questions one could ask this God, and what would his answers be? Why is it evil existing in the world? Why is there cruelty? Why is there genocide? Why are these things happening? So to me, that's what it was all about. And again, it's always been my belief that you can write the very best sentiments you have in the most thrilling form. That there should be no division. You know, that things should be extremely exciting in a book, and yet you can be concerned with those passions.
It happens often that when you see a character coming out in many books, some people will see them as some sort of a hero. Do you see Lestat like that?
Oh yes, definitely a hero, a person condemned to a way of existence that he didn't want, who refuses to give up on vitality itself. Definitely heroic.
How do you feel about the effect that it causes in a lot of people. I see that you're dressed in a very extravagant way today, and we've seen a lot of that reaction in a lot of people. It seems to free a lot of people to express themselves in a very beautiful way. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'll tell you, in the beginning I was quite surprised when people showed up at the signings and they were wearing lace and jewels and antique satins and silks, but they've taught me that it's all right to do that. It's all right, and they've loosened me up, and now I want to enjoy it too. And I've also discovered that people can be very ornately dressed up and enjoying the whole fun aspect of it, and they can be wearing a jewel at the throat, and they will ask perhaps the most challenging question, of anybody in the line, that there's no split, say, that from the youngest readers to the oldest, people have highly individual responses to the books. I can't always explain them, but they've taught me to dress like this.
Yeah.
I decided it would be fun.
In the same chain of thought, there's a band from Montreal in the city that's called Talamasca.
Oh, really?
And he sings a song called We Watch and We're All Here.
Oh, how lovely.
And I've left a package for you in a box or something, so you'll have all the information about that, but it's something you should look into. It's very
I'm honored. I'm truly honored.
Can you tell me why vampire literature is an increasing trend?
Yeah.
Well, I think people are beginning to see that it's no longer just pulp. I mean, there was a period there in American literature where horror writing really had slipped into the pulp magazines. It was not, we were past Edgar Allan Poe and Hawthorne, and we had forgotten the Bronte sisters and Mary Shelley, and really only low-grade publications did horror. Then certain writers attempted to use it seriously. I was one of them, and there have been others who wanted to write better books using the same flamboyant motifs.
What about erotic aspect? I mean, can you separate it from vampirism?
Well, in my work, everything is instinctual. I just write as it flows, and what happens happens. And, I don't plan it. And when people tell me it's very sensuous or it's an allegory of gay life, I'm honored, but I don't necessarily put it in there. I just write from the heart. And when I'm writing, I am a bisexual person, a bisexual mind. So.
Question here. You wear a cross today.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your book is about hell and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Did it change your notion of God writing that book?
No.
No?
It didn't change my notion of God at all. It allowed me to get intimate with my fears. My great fear is that there isn't a God paying attention to us. I can't quite figure it out like everyone else today. And to me, what this cross really means is exactly what it came to mean. It means love and harmony, but it's been used 1,000 times, to cover crimes and wars and crusades and persecutions. So I wear it as a symbol of what it's sincerely meant to be. I've noticed on the United States, in all the cities we went to, people are all wearing crosses. And I've asked them, why are you wearing that cross? And they'll say, I'm trying very hard to forge a new set of beliefs for myself. So it seems to me that, we wear it with respect, not just an ornament.
I read somewhere that you wrote that book during the night and that you're afraid of the dark. How could you do that?
I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. Well, I write it with the lights on and the door open to the bedroom, and my husband is sleeping about 10 feet away. So that's generally how I do it.
Question. Do you feel that your world is your sense of utopia? That's the way it fits your lifestyle. So you live by what you read, by what you write, and what you do?
Well, in my personal life, I've certainly attained almost a dream state. In that I've returned to New Orleans. I live in a big house near where I was born. I'm able to fulfill my dreams, things
So
like
that's reality,
that.
what you
Yeah.
know.
But I think all the books are about people reaching for some state of happiness in spite of some inflicted, impediment. That the vampires, they see everything as beautiful, but they have to kill to stay alive. And I think we're a lot that way ourselves. I don't like to speak of the allegorical meaning of these books, but in a way, vampirism is a metaphor for affluence, the incredible affluence we have in these countries while people starve in others. We drink their blood. That concerns me a great deal, more than one might think. I watch the news and I write. And it's creeping more and more into my work, those upfront concerns, those upfront questions. But it's always been there. It was even there in Interview, the first one, where everything was a question of relationships between these four people, amongst these four people.
Why do you always say this is not about vampires, it's about us, and yet you continue to write about vampires?
Well, it really is about us. And the comment that it isn't about vampires is simply for those who are prejudiced against vampire literature, who don't believe that it can have meaning. I'm simply saying it does, you know.
Couldn't you wouldn't want to do something on, a couple in Connecticut you were talking about?
Never, never. I have no interest in pedestrian realism. To me, it seems an artificial form. It's artificial. To write perpetually about commonplace people in commonplace situations who are mediocre becomes almost a domination by the middle class, a materialistic view dominating everything that tells you.
That's the type of life we lead, no?
No, but literature has never been about what we lead. I mean, Shakespeare didn't write about his wife. You didn't, can you imagine a publisher today sitting him down and saying, now, Will, you've never been to Denmark? You can't write about princes that lived 100 years ago? I mean, we have a long tradition before today of writing from our imaginations, for really reaching for the stars when we write, for writing something that sweeps us away. I mean, Greek tragedy was like that. The poetry of Goethe was like that. Opera is certainly like that. That's the tradition that I belong to, I feel. Edgar Allan Poe, Hawthorne, those writers.
How would you characterize human beings? Good, bad?
Inherently good, but definitely there's some problem. People are driven to war almost as if it's genetic. They're driven to genocide as if it's genetic. And I'm very perplexed, like everyone else today, about the situation.
In your latest book, Lestat says everybody in New Orleans believes in ghosts.
Yes.
Do you?
Yes, I do indeed. And everyone in New Orleans does indeed. And every person you meet on the street will have a story about a ghost that they have either seen or felt or spoken to and so forth. It's a common occurrence. And I have never experienced it myself. No.
You've never spoken to one?
No, I have never even experienced a ghostly presence. But I think I keep all that at arm's length. I don't go walking around looking for it. But strange things happen every day. There are active haunted houses all over New Orleans. People there believe very much in ghosts. I think they believe very much in intimacy with those who have died, through affection and through perhaps the ghostly incidents they describe are more manifestations of affection sometime from the ghost or from themselves than something horrible. We talk all the time about the dead as if they were there. Like what would Aunt Nancy think? What would Kitty have thought of this? We don't have that American horror of death, that almost aversion to it as if it were bad taste to talk about it. That's not, New Orleans is a completely different world.
That's why you chose to live there.
Well, I was born there. And I grew up there playing in the cemeteries and celebrating the Feast of All Saints on November 1st with visiting the cemeteries and taking flowers to the grave and talking about the dead as if they were, as if they were still with us, as if their souls could be comforted by what we were doing. So I didn't choose it. It chose me, and I loved it.
What are you more obsessive about, erotica writing or vampire writing?
Well, the erotica I did is long past. I did it years ago, and it was published in 3 volumes, and I really have nothing further to add to it. I feel that the 2 pseudonyms I had, A.N. Roquelaure and Anne Rampling, we're all together, the 3 of us. We write as one, Anne Rice.
You still practice it, however, in your lifestyle, you still practice it.
Oh, I've been married for 34 years to one man. My lifestyle is like a vanilla ice cream. It's becoming unique. It's strictly from the imagination.
Are you afraid of dying?
No, not at all. And that's a fairly recent occurrence. I'm going home and discovering I wasn't afraid of it. So I think that's one reason why on this tour I've wanted to wear black and didn't mind being carried around in a coffin and things of this kind, because I felt more at ease with the idea that this is part of life, that, I hate to bring it up, but we're all going to die, sooner or later. But I have lost the natural fear of it. I don't have it.
Was it hard to see Lestat die, literally?
Well, he didn't, really.
No, but in your work, it's your last book.
He walked off on me, and it was quite an emotional experience. The character just left me. It was as if the power to communicate through that character was gone. He turned around and said, enough. Go right now about something else. Memnoch the Devil is the 5th book with this character, and in a sense, he's done everything that I want him to do. And, the final confrontation with God and the devil, and one last very interesting possibility of redemption, still left him muddled and battered and witnessing things that he couldn't in conscience embrace. So it was enough. It was finally the ultimate. And so now I want to write books involved with ghosts and spirits. I really want very much to do that. I love working with the supernatural. I always work with it. To me, life is supernatural. When someone dies, it's supernatural. You know.
Do you have any other movie projects?
Well, in the movies, I hear they're working on The Vampire Lestat, but I don't know anything about it. I wrote the script recently for The Witching Hour and for Lasher, 2 books I had done, and the script is in the hands of Warner Brothers, and I don't know what they'll do with it. But their world moves at a completely different pace than my world. And every now and then I get drawn into that world, but usually end up returning to mine where I can cast the book and produce it and direct it exactly as I please. And, you know, my beloved publisher will publish it. You know. In their world, things can die in vaults. You can write a script and never see it again. You know, it belongs to them. Is there anything else I can...
In the book, there's a reference to 12 books of Winkin de Wild, I'm not sure.
Yes, right.
We don't really learn very much about those books. Will we learn that in future
I've thought
books?
about that. I've thought about getting... That was a story that I very much wanted to tell, and I was very enchanted with the idea of somebody using the miniature art to send erotic messages. And I find the books fascinating, so I may develop that. I'd love to have tales within tales within tales, and many times I don't take them any further, but that was a particularly dear idea to me of Winkin de Wilde. And of course, a lot of the research about those times was correct. There were groups, like there were heretical groups, heretical quote unquote, that did meet and did make free love and did believe in the reinterpretation of scripture. Yeah.
I just have one question. In parts of the book that are narrated by Memnoch, he's very plausible, but yet, as a reader, I have to keep telling myself, I'm listening to a liar.
Maybe. I mean, but does it make sense that the devil would be so stupid as to fall and then never learn anything in 7,000 years? I mean, you know, it's who's lying? I mean, you know, God incarnate doesn't come down and say you have to believe in Memnoch, you know. It really, I was trying to test everything I've been taught and saying, now this is what you're really saying, there is a God and a devil? Okay, well, how did this happen? You know, that was the idea. Let's go.
Meet some fans.
Okay, let's go. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Oh merde, on peut pas la faire signer ici. Hein?